Welcome to Defense Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: PLA uses Microsoft mixed reality headsets to maintain equipment, video shows. There is a path to victory in Ukraine. Insight why the Indian Ocean could be China's Achilles heel in a Taiwan war. Gaza faces perfect storm of deadly diseases. Senate passes defense policy bill void of most GOP culture war demands. PLA uses Microsoft mixed reality headsets to maintain equipment, video shows. South China Morning Post. China's military unit, the People's Liberation Army, PLA, Air Force, is reportedly using Microsoft's HoloLens 2 headset to maintain its equipment. The mixed reality goggles allow maintenance personnel to carry out a virtual disassembly before examination of aircraft engines, ensuring that the engines are replaced quickly and accurately. The use of mixed reality technology is part of China's push to modernize its armed forces, with President Xi Jinping setting the target of having a world-class military by the middle of the century. Microsoft has not commented on the use of its headset by the PLA. There is a path to victory in Ukraine. Foreign Affairs. As Ukraine enters another winter of war, skepticism about the country's prospects is growing. Some argue that Ukraine will be unable to retake more territory from Russia and that international support is eroding. However, the author argues that this pessimism is dangerous and wrong. While it is true that Ukraine's recent counteroffensive did not achieve immediate success, the author argues that victory is still attainable with strategic endurance and vision. Ukraine has already achieved notable results in recent months, such as the liberation of the Black Sea and gains on the southern front. The author believes that victory requires three factors: adequate military aid, the development of industrial capacity, and a principled and realistic approach to negotiations with Russia. The author also argues against the idea of a negotiated ceasefire, stating that it would only pause the fighting until Russia is ready to make another push inland. The author believes that a negotiated ceasefire is not even on the table and that it would be immoral and naive to expect Ukraine to take the first step towards peace. The author warns that if the front line were frozen now, there is no reason to believe that Russia would not use the respite to plan a more brutal attack in the future, potentially involving neighboring countries and even NATO members. Despite the challenges, the author argues that supporting Ukraine's fight for freedom is not only just but also strategically beneficial. Every dollar invested in Ukraine's defense returns clear security dividends for its supporters. The author believes that giving up on Ukraine would send a signal of weakness to adversaries and could lead to smaller hot wars between states. Ukraine is not willing to give up, even in the face of suffering and weariness, and the author urges Western analysts to listen to the views of the Ukrainian people. The author concludes by stating that staying the course is difficult but necessary, and that Ukraine knows how to win. Insight why the Indian Ocean could be China's Achilles heel in a Taiwan war. Yahoo! As China's presence in the Indian Ocean grows, the country's trade routes become increasingly vulnerable to interdiction. The ocean is a vital transit route for China's oil, which is transported between the Persian Gulf and Chinese ports by over 60 very large crude carriers, VLCCs, on a daily basis. The Chinese Navy's lack of air support in the region makes it particularly vulnerable in the event of a conflict with the US, as the vast majority of its warships would effectively be trapped in the Indian Ocean. This vulnerability is being increasingly scrutinized by Western military strategists, who are considering how best to exploit it in the event of a conflict with China. While China has started to diversify its oil import routes, with pipelines from Russia, Myanmar and Kazakhstan expected to account for 10% of its imports in 2022, the vast majority of its oil and natural gas imports still pass through the South China Sea or the Malacca Strait. Gaza faces perfect storm of deadly diseases. Yahoo! Disease is spreading throughout the besieged Gaza Strip, according to doctors and aid workers, as a result of the lack of food, clean water, and shelter. An epidemic of dysentery is now expected to spread throughout Gaza, where hundreds of thousands of people are living in makeshift shelters without access to toilets, clean water, or showers. The United Nations has also warned of the potential for outbreaks of watery diarrhea and acute respiratory infections. The World Health Organization has reported a 66% increase in cases of diarrhea amongst children under 5 in the past 2 weeks. The situation has been exacerbated by the closure of hospitals and clinics as a result of the conflict. The United Nations has warned that a diarrhea outbreak could occur as soon as tomorrow. The 51-day conflict between Israel and Hamas left 2,200 Palestinians dead and 73 Israelis dead. Senate passes defense policy bill void of most GOP culture war demands. Washington Post. The Senate on Wednesday passed the annual defense policy bill, delivering a rebuke to hard right-house conservatives who sought to infuse the legislation with a wish list of provisions to undo Pentagon policies encompassing abortion access, LGBTQ+ rights and diversity initiatives. Superconnector Hong Kong has U.S. firmly in its sights in pivot to Middle East. South China Morning Post. Hong Kong is shifting its focus to West Asia in a bid to strengthen its position as a financial and digital hub. The territory is targeting the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, Belt and Road Initiative countries and West Asia as its key markets. The move puts Hong Kong in direct competition with the U.S. and challenges American hegemony. The U.S. has been critical of China's Belt and Road Initiative and wary of its investments in the region. China and Russia are emerging as the primary interlocutors in West Asia, with Iran, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates to join BRICS+, the bloc originally comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. Defense force called in after suspected grenade found in WA outback town. The Sydney Morning Herald. The Australian Defence Force, ADF, is travelling to the remote town of Colombo in Western Australia's northwest after locals discovered what appears to be a grenade. The ADF will arrive in the town to safely dispose of the item. The town of Colombo was subject to nearly a dozen Japanese air raids during World War II, leading to speculation that the grenade could be a relic from that time. This incident follows a similar one earlier this year in which the ADF was called to a backyard in remote Queensland after a resident discovered a World War II hand grenade. Exclusive, nearly half of the Israeli munitions dropped on Gaza are imprecise dumb bombs, U.S. intelligence assessment finds. CNN. According to a U.S. intelligence assessment, nearly half of the munitions used by the Israeli military in Gaza since October 7 have been unguided, also known as dumb bombs. The rest have been guided munitions. The use of unguided munitions is a concern as they are typically less precise and can pose a greater threat to civilians, particularly in densely populated areas like Gaza. The use of these munitions may be contributing to the high civilian death toll. Israel claims to be trying to minimize civilian casualties, but the use of unguided munitions at such a high rate contradicts this claim. The use of unguided munitions increases the risk of missed targets and civilian harm. The U.S. has phased out its own use of unguided munitions over the past decade. The U.S. provides Israel with unguided munitions, but also systems to transform them into guided ones. The U.S. has urged Israel to be more precise and deliberate in its targeting of Hamas fighters, but currently has no plans to place conditions on the military aid it is providing to Israel. Eyes on Orbán as EU decides on support for Ukraine. BBC. Hungarian Prime Minister, Viktor Orbán, has resisted Ukraine's bid to join the EU and called for EU funds to be used to help Hungarian communities in Ukraine. The EU has pledged €54 billion to aid Ukraine's economy until 2024 and €24 billion in military support. However, Hungary could block the funds and Ukraine's accession to the EU. Some compromises have been suggested, including unlocking €10.2 billion of EU funds for Hungary. President Zelensky has accused Budapest of standing in the way. Other EU leaders support Ukraine's bid, but Orbán argues Ukraine is not ready and accuses Brussels of lowering the bar. Ohtani can opt out of Dodgers deal if execs Walter, Friedman lose roles with team, reports. CBC. Shohei Ohtani will be able to terminate his $700 million, 10-year contract with the Los Angeles Dodgers if either controlling owner Mark Walter or president of baseball operations Andrew Friedman leave the team. The deal, announced on December 13, will see 97% of the money deferred without interest and not fully paid until 2043. A report from The Athletic suggested Ohtani would be allowed to opt out at the end of a season if the Dodgers made specific personnel changes. The agreement has not yet been submitted to Major League Baseball. Walter's financial services company Guggenheim Partners bought the Dodgers in 2012 for $2.15 billion, but his attendance at games has decreased in recent seasons. Friedman, meanwhile, has won 9 division titles, 3 National League pennants and the 2020 World Series in his 7 seasons with the team. Dear viewers, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the sixth dimension, here to bring you the latest news and insights from around the world. Let's dive into today's stories. First up, the People's Liberation Army, PLA, Air Force in China is using Microsoft's HoloLens 2 headset for maintenance work. This mixed reality technology allows personnel to virtually disassemble aircraft engines for examination, making the process quicker and more accurate. It's just another example of China's push to modernize its armed forces. Who knew Microsoft had a role to play in military operations? Moving on, there's an interesting piece in Foreign Affairs about Ukraine. Despite skepticism about its prospects, the author argues that victory is still attainable with strategic endurance and vision. Ukraine has already made notable progress in recent months, and the author believes that with adequate military aid, industrial development, and a realistic approach to negotiations with Russia, victory is within reach. It's a reminder that sometimes the underdog can surprise us all. Now we turn our attention to China and its Achilles heel in a Taiwan war. As China's presence in the Indian Ocean grows, its trade routes become more vulnerable to interdiction. The lack of air support in the region for the Chinese Navy could trap their warships in the Indian Ocean in the event of a conflict with the U.S. Western military strategists are already considering how to exploit this vulnerability. It seems China's expansion comes with some risks. In a more somber story, Gaza is facing a perfect storm of deadly diseases. The lack of food, clean water, and shelter in the besieged strip has led to the spread of diseases like dysentery. The situation is dire, with the potential for outbreaks of diarrhea and acute respiratory infections. The conflict between Israel and Hamas has only worsened the situation, with hospitals and clinics closing down. The people of Gaza are in desperate need of help. Shifting our focus to the U.S., the Senate has passed the annual defense policy bill, rejecting the insertion of controversial provisions by hard-right House conservatives. The bill rebukes attempts to undo Pentagon policies on abortion access, LGBTQ+ rights, and diversity initiatives. It's a reminder that even in a divided political landscape, some things can still be agreed upon. Now let's talk about Hong Kong's ambitions. The territory is looking to strengthen its position as a financial and digital hub by focusing on West Asia. This puts Hong Kong in direct competition with the US and challenges American hegemony. While the US has been critical of China's Belt and Road Initiative, China and Russia are emerging as primary players in the region. It's a shift that could have significant consequences for the balance of power. In Australia, the Defence Force has been called in after a suspected grenade was found in the remote town of Colombo. The ADF will dispose of the item, which could potentially be a relic from World War II. It's a reminder of the lasting impact of past conflicts and the need for vigilance. In a concerning development, a U.S. intelligence assessment has found that nearly half of the munitions used by the Israeli military in Gaza have been unguided dumb bombs. This raises concerns about civilian casualties, as unguided munitions are typically less precise. The U.S. has urged Israel to be more deliberate in its targeting, but currently has no plans to change its military aid. It's a difficult situation with no easy answers. Turning to Europe, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán is resisting Ukraine's bid to join the EU. He's calling for EU funds to be used to help Hungarian communities in Ukraine instead. This could potentially block the funds and Ukraine's accession to the EU. It's a reminder that politics and regional tensions can complicate the path to integration. Lastly, in the world of sports, Shohei Ohtani's massive contract with the Los Angeles Dodgers comes with an interesting clause. Ohtani can terminate the contract if either the team's controlling owner or the president of baseball operations leaves. It's a reminder that sometimes the success of a team depends on more than just the players. That's all for today's news. Now it's time for your thoughts and questions. What do you make of China's use of mixed reality headsets for military maintenance? How do you see the situation in Ukraine playing out? And what are your thoughts on Hong Kong's pivot to West Asia? I'm eager to hear your opinions. Until next time, this is Dr. Six signing off. Stay curious, my friends. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.